Okay, so one of the problems with batching is that people will come to you and they'll say, hey, can I get this method to do like 100 rather than just one at a time? And you'll have to go in and redo the function and rebuild and reissue the artifact, take the app down, etc., etc. Now, this shouldn't be the case. Every single endpoint should be able to handle a map as well as an array list of maps. It's really simple to do this because every single endpoint can be able to tell the difference between an array list and a map, and handle them appropriately. Just as you can see here, I mean, the previous example, a single map would be an array list with only one entry, whereas here we have an array list with two maps as entries, and you should be able to detect that and automate that and just loop through the through the uh, through the endpoint. But most people don't do this and don't know how to do this, and so they end up doing way more work than they should. And we integrated that into the Spring-boot-starter-beapi so that everybody can do this and simplify all of their APIs. And we're going to go into that and show you how to do that. So before we get into batching, let's first talk about the URL. As you can see, we have localhost 8080, and then we have B 1.0 and, controller and the action. So let's talk about that real quick. The URL is broken down into first the the localhost port, and then as you can see we have a call type and a version, and then the controller and the action. Now the call type is what separates how each different API set of functionality is called, and then the version of the application. So the call type specifies whether it is a normal API call or, like in this case, a batch call. And you can read more about that in the documentation, but we're not going to get into that much right now. All right, so as you can see, I have BAPI as a service running in the background here. And I have already generated my token and what. And we're just going to go through what I'm going to be running as a batch. So as you can see, we have the batch listed literally as a list of maps, and we're going to be calling authority create because this is literally the easiest thing to create in the framework here in the starter. And we declare it as batch because this simplifies it getting confused with any other variable. So if you had another variable called authority or something like that, anywhere within your framework as a service or anything like that, we just put it all under batch as a list, and it's not going to get confused. And we call it with B, so we know that if you have a router, a load balancer or something in front, and you want to route to a bunch of different servers just for batching, so on and so forth, you can do that as well. And this is how we're going to call it. So very, very simple. Content type application JSON. There's our token. We're going to do it with a post authority create. Everything's very, very simple. Here's the data. If you've never done a curl call, this looks very, very complex. It's not. I'm just putting everything up here ahead of time to show you how it's everything that we're putting in here. This is the data. That's the URL. Here's the token. Just looks like a lot, but it's not. And here we go. We'll go into a separate window to go ahead and make the call. And that's that. It was just that fast. Did all the looping through all the APIs, got back the data, and you can see right here it sends it all back concatenated with the ID of everything created. So that literally took like 0.1 seconds. Because if you were to do this with a redirect for every single one, that has to drop a thread go outside the DMZ, come back in, recreate the request, make the call, go out, drop the thread, go outside the DMZ, etc., etc. Every single time it does that. Whereas with the Spring Boot Starter BAPI, we use a forward. And that just reuses the existing request response and token, which has all the information we already need to do this over and over and over internal. So that's why it's so fast to do this. And that should show you how to do batching in Spring Boot Starter BAPI. If there are any questions, go ahead and post them here on the video or send them to the forums and on the project itself. Thank you very much for watching. Take care.